Welcome back to Horror Heals. I'm Corey.
And I'm Kendall. Today we're talking with Ash from Dead Puppy Studios, which is one of those business names you really can't walk past without asking some questions.
Yeah, especially when the table is covered with masks that look like they were stitched together from human skin.
That might have been what got my attention.
Yes, I think it was. So we met Ash at Monster, and that's not Monster, it's Monster Expo in Nashua, New Hampshire. And after talking for just a few minutes, we knew there was a Horror Heals story here. Ash creates masks, special effects and props, has worked as a scare actor, makes music and art, and has built this wonderfully creepy creative world around Dead Puppy Studios.
What surprised me is that Ash wasn't always a horror fan. Quite the opposite. Ash grew up scared of a lot of things and experienced some very real trauma along the way. Even as an adult, horror could be too much.
Ash tells us about going into a haunted house just a few years ago, having a panic attack, and needing to be taken out. But instead of calling it a night, Ash went back inside.
And eventually went from being terrified in haunted houses to working in one and terrifying everyone else. I appreciate that kind of turnaround.
Especially when your character is a southern cannibal grandma sitting on a porch.
I would have loved her.
Yeah, of course you would. There's a lot more going on here than a good scare. Ash talks very openly about trauma, starting over, finding a creative outlet, and discovering that confronting frightening things in a controlled environment could actually be cathartic.
Which is exactly what we talk about on this show. Horror can give us a place to face things that are much harder to face in real life.
And sometimes you apparently face them by making a lamp made out of fake human skin.
Whatever works.
That's Horror Heals, where the things that scare us can also save us. Here's part one of our conversation with Ash from Dead Puppy Studios. Hello, Ash. Welcome to the Horror Heals podcast.
So glad to be here.
We met in Nashua, New Hampshire at the Monster Expo, one of the horror cons here in the area that we love to hit because it's always got really unique vendors, artists, and stuff.
That's awesome.
I can usually have a pretty good sense as to who's going to be a good podcast guest. And so I wanted to make sure that you got our card.
I love to talk, so...
I think Kendall was actually drawn in immediately from the masks, the human skin style masks. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Sure. And it's kind of weird that that's my specialty is human skin type masks. It started from working in a haunted house, and the mask that I had to wear wasn't super comfortable. I also felt the character needed something different aesthetically. I made my first mask for the haunted house.
Wow.
And they're like, of course you can wear that. Yes. And so that became the staple character. I was also the only character that played the entire same role the entire season, usually in a haunt, just because it can be very tiring to do the same types of roles, especially if they're character acting roles over again. But it was also a southern grandma on a porch that's a cannibal. And I guess I just fit that vibe. Maybe it's the accent.
I think everybody needs one of those grandmas, a cannibal grandma at the haunt, for sure.
Yeah, but
it
it got everything started. And that's kind of how the Masks and Special Effects Studio was born.
I imagine just going to work for a haunt that you would probably have been a horror fan for a long time.
So ironically, I was a terrified child and have had extreme anxiety, still have it, and deal with some depression and now PTSD as well. So I actually was scared of everything for most of my life. We went to Disneyland or Disney World, and I was probably 5 years old, and my mom tells this story of how we would be on the bus going between the parks, and I'd ask about a ride, and I'd be like, is there a witch on that ride? And my mom's over there, her hands no, don't say it. And they're like, yeah, but it's a nice witch. And I'm like, well, Mom, we're not going on that ride. I had some early death in my family. I had an uncle I lost at 4, and we were very close, unfortunately, in the AIDS epidemic. And then I had a cousin who was murdered when I was 11. And so I think a lot of that created some traumas and anxieties at a very young age. And then I was in an abusive relationship for 15 years where my life was kind of horror and trauma. And I remember she liked horror, and The Purge, when that TV show came out, when she would put it on, I couldn't even listen to it. I'd have to put headphones on because the sounds even made me, and this is like me at 30 years old, right? Like as an adult. And I just was scared. And I guess it's when your life is horror, you necessarily don't want to engage with that. But after I was able to kind of escape that, get a divorce, refine myself, horror became this place where I found healing, which is why I was like, I would love to be on this podcast, because my entire ethos and the entire mission of Dead Puppy Studios, it's part of why we're named Dead Puppy Studios, is because it's by confronting the stuff that makes us like scared and uncomfortable, we can be free. That was kind of the truth for me. And I could talk a lot about the psychology of horror and all of those things, because I've explored that as a modality for my own healing. So no, I was not always into horror. I didn't go to my first haunted house until about 5 years ago. And the very first haunted house I went into, and this was Halloween Horror Nights, so I did start big in Orlando, but I had a panic attack at like halfway through the house and had to be pulled out. I'm like buried in my best friend's back, and like she had actual like scratch marks on her by the end of the night, so I was like holding on so tightly. But we left, the staff took us out, and I said, you know what, I spent too much money for this, and I really want to do this, and this is a fear I've always wanted to confront because I am into this horror stuff now. Let's do these haunted houses. And so we ended up going back in, and by the end of the night, I wasn't buried in my face. It's exposure therapy to an extent, right? Horror truly was a catalyst for my own healing. And that is also a lot of what I put into my art and the things that I do.
So, out of curiosity, which haunted house, like what was the theme of the house that freaked you out?
It was the Weekend house they did that year. And I think it's a lot of things, because also, ADHD, have some regulation, like loads of mental illness that I carry. And sometimes those things can just be like really stimulating and overstimulating. And so I don't know that it was the scariness as much as the scariness, the lights, the fog, like all of the things all at once for the first time. And then we find out later that that's one of the most intense houses. So I like had started with the most intense house, but you want to start early because you want the lines when it's short. And, now I walk in front at haunted houses when we go through with my friends. And so it's like that evolution of, if you can get me to jump scare, I like laugh and have fun. It's like a very cathartic moment.
I like being scared in those. That's the reason you go, right? I love it when they scare me.
And it's fun to scare people. In scare acting, there's different things, because like you should never touch anybody. And I would highly advise you to never go to a haunted house that says like they're going to touch you, or it's a bad situation that can turn into a lawsuit very quickly. There is different zones. So there's like your personal zone, which is like within 2 to 3 feet of you. And then there is your intimate zone, which is like 18 to 12 inches away. And so it's training yourself to get into that intimate zone with people. And I had this porch I could stand on, so I could get really close without touching you and even like whisper things, right? So you don't even have to yell. And it's like, it's so fun. And we'd have people drop to their knees and in fear. And we did have a couple of accidents where people actually, pissed their pants at the haunted house, and we had to bring in the cleaning crew. It's fun to scare people. And ironically, who gets the most scared? It's like the guys that come in and think they're going to be all tough for their girlfriends. And then they're the ones that are like screaming and jumping all over the place.
That's me on a roller coaster. Yeah. People probably think I have Tourette's when I'm on I can't not curse. And it's just,
I love that.
yeah.
I love a good roller coaster.
Was deciding to actually be a scare actor, is that part of the healing as well? Or was it just like the natural progression of you're getting into this hardcore?
So the story is, I like to say that we're political refugees. As you can tell, I'm not born and raised in Boston or in Salem, Massachusetts, but was born and raised about an hour outside of Nashville, lived in Nashville for about 10 years. And just with the political landscape, and as a recent study showed, Tennessee was number 49 on the most unsafe places for LGBTQ plus. And when I had told my wife, if he wins, we'll move, I thought I was just saying words. Like, I really thought there's like no way. And
Yeah.
that happened. And a month and a half later, we were packed into a 26-foot U-Haul truck that I should not have been allowed to drive and moving across the country. And we picked Salem specifically. We also moved sight unseen to our apartment. We got like a FaceTime tour from the property management. I'm like, let's do it. It looks great. I knew that I wanted to get into spooky Halloween horror in some kind of way. So that's how we ended up in Salem. And then the haunted house was, because that was our first full year that we were here, that I got involved there. And it all kind of just snowballed from there and has really taken off this year to where we started our business. It's an official LLC. We've been doing a lot of vending. We've worked on some horror movies and some music videos, doing special effects. Halloween season's coming up, so I am about to be incredibly busy on top of my day job, which is also in events, but it's more tech conferences and big events for like the Fortune 500 tech clients. So it's a lot of travel and it's also event season. So I am about to have no sleep, 7 days a week of work and lots of travel.
But it sounds fun. It sounds like you're enjoying it, right? That's the point. Yeah.
No, it does. And it's funny because being in events professionally, and about 3 weeks or 2 weeks, I'll be speaking at the SEMA Summit in Canada. So it's at Toronto, about partner ecosystem. So totally different side, but it was through events that I realized I really wanted to get into like immersive horror and immersive events. And I didn't know that until I got into events. And it was like this perfect synergy of the professional side and then the passionate side, building this outlet where I could create. And I'm really lucky to have a day job where I have a good work life balance and I'm able to do this stuff after work and on the weekends.
The artwork, was that something that you were always interested in, or was it just that recently that you decided that this is, again, part of the natural progression?
Art for me, for most of my life, was music. And I was a gigging musician in Nashville before I left. I played out almost every week. And I always was like a doodler and would do some painting, but never in a serious way. And it's also, I think, a reminder for anything in life. And I believe this, everything is just practice. You can do anything you want to do if you try. It's like your effort and your attitude, If you want to do it, go do it. Learn how to do it. Watch videos, find lessons, try it, fail at it, do it again. And I think that's one of the things. And I feel like growing up with old school video games also taught us that, because it's like I will play over and over and over. And it's like each time you get one round further, but by the end you actually get there. And I think it's everything's about that. It's about finding something you want to do and you just practice. I have really worked on my drawing, which I always just drew. And I'd say I was like decent, but I've gotten to where I have some pieces that I'm going to start offering as prints as well. I did take clay class in high school. And so clay and like molding things with my hands, I've always kind of had just a depth for. But it's really something of like the creativity has lived in me in very different ways throughout my life. And it's come out in a lot of different outlets.
Let's go back to the masks for a moment. What are those made of?
I use for the base of all my masks foam clay. And that's like an air dry clay. It's like EVA foam, which is what a lot of people use for cosplay. And it is sculptable, moldable, sandable, but it's super flexible as well. And it's way more comfortable than like a hard plastic. And then like all of them on the inside, because part of it as well, because of my own anxieties, I can't wear full over the head silicone or latex type masks because they make me feel claustrophobic. And so I need to wear either half masks or like, so a lot of my masks have ties or elastic. I do a lot of cushioning because the cushioning that comes in the plastic mask sucks. So I try to make them very comfortable to wear because I've had to sit and wear a mask for 10 hours. A lot of it comes from the comfortability. I take like those cheap white, just regular masks that you see, or one of my clown masks, my main clown mold that I use was the Money Heist mask. And then I take aluminum foil and tape and basically sculpt what I want it to look like. And so you take this Money Heist mask and then, you know, you add all this stuff to it, you give it a nose, and you're just like molding aluminum foil and then putting painter's tape over it so it's smooth. And sometimes there's also hot glue involved. And then you've got the base of this mask, and I roll everything out. So I roll out the clay and then I lay it over it and I let it dry. And then once it gets to that point, that's when I'll sand it, paint it. For any of the latex, I'm making latex sheets, or I am putting like some kind of adherence. Medical gauze is my favorite thing to use because it holds the latex very well and still gives you a very skin-like texture. And so sometimes I'll apply that directly to the mask. Sometimes I'll make the sheets of skin and then cut them up, paint them, and like hand stitch them together and then glue them onto the outside of the masks. But it's a bit of primarily hand painting with acrylic heavy body paints, as well as sometimes I will airbrush. Airbrush is one of those skills that I am still practicing. So it's all about practice. And I've learned so much through this of what works and what doesn't work. And some of my first masks that I made with the skin pieces, I didn't realize that you need to put latex in the paint or it's going to crack if you're painting onto latex. And so you learn a lot of these different things as you do it. And I think that's just art, right? Is you practice, you learn, you make mistakes, you reiterate. And as long as you keep creating, then you keep getting better.
It's great advice.
And so what does Halloween season in Salemville look like for you this year?
This year, I'm not working at the Haunt. They are having the Warren Haunted Museum in that space this year. So go check that out if you are into spooky stuff. I am going to be at Haunted Happenings. I'm there the weekend of the 10th and the 11th. I'll be at Derby Square. That is right on Essex Street by the Old Town Hall. And then I will also be there at Halloween night. So that's going to be a fun day. And I'll be offering masks, some costume pieces. And then for those, I'm actually going to bring my kit and do some special effects makeup if anybody's interested in that. So if you want to walk around Salem with like a black eye or like a bloody cut, stop by and see me. Next month, I will be at the Maine Paranormal and Horror Convention in Augusta. And so super excited to be there. Also going to be doing the masks. And I believe there may be a special effects competition that I take a part of as well. And then working on some stuff for some local haunts here just to get them ready, some props and things like that. So super busy. I've got skin lamps is what I have to make this week. So if you guys remember seeing the skin lamp with the face on it, that is what my entire week is going to be this week before I head off to Canada.
Wow.
That's a lot.
You're a project manager as well.
And it's funny because I wrote this quote down and I found myself saying this in a business meeting the other day. And I'm like, why am I this person? Because it's the stuff that comes from the professional side of me. But Simon Sinek is amazing. And he's got this quote that working hard for something we don't care about is called stress, but working hard for something we love is called passion. That's what it is for me. It's like, this is my outlet. Also, one fun thing is we've been going through a lot of trauma in therapy lately. I have a new amazing therapist and we are working on some exposure therapy. And through that, we talk about how emotions are stored energy in the body and you've got to get that energy out. And so I've actually made some masks after therapy sessions, and they've been pretty cathartic to do. So that's like been a cool new thing that I've started to do that's helped me in my healing journey as well. Sometimes I watch a movie and I'm inspired a lot by Rob Zombie. It was amazing meeting Bill Moseley and getting pictures. He actually stopped by my booth and I thought I was going to like have a heart attack, but I got a picture with him. It's on my Instagram. It's busy, but when it's something you love, it doesn't feel like work. The part that feels like work is making all the reels and all of the social media marketing that you have to do to get traction. So that's the part that feels like work, but like the creating it's part of my own healing and dealing and processing.
I think we feel the same way. And Kendall and I have different skill sets that we utilize. So like I do the editing and stuff on the podcast, and he thinks it's totally, I love it. Like I like figuring out like, oh man, what is that noise in the background? How do I get rid of that? Like, and can I tighten this up a little bit and all that. So I'm a lifelong journalist. So I think it just comes part of the editing process is just, part of that.
Like my wife and I have like we think about things totally different, but I think that's important, especially in like collaborations and partnerships. And she's not an official part of Dead Puppy Studios, but she is definitely the behind the scenes and the reason that I'm able to do it and the cheerleader that is there. We need our partners who have different skills than us to help us be the best that we can be. So I love that.
I think we knew Ash was going to be fun when we met her at Monster Expo, but I didn't expect this conversation to go into so many different directions.
Neither did I. We started with those human skin masks and ended up talking about fear, trauma, therapy, art, moving across the country, Salem, Massachusetts, haunted houses, and how creativity can become part of rebuilding your life.
And I really like that Ash doesn't pretend the fear just disappeared. This is someone who had to leave a haunted house because it became too overwhelming, then decided to go back in. A few years later, Ash is the person inside the haunt, making everyone else scream.
There's something beautifully horror heals about that. The thing you once couldn't even tolerate becomes something you understand, control, and eventually create yourself.
And Ash is creating a lot. Masks, special effects, drawings, music, props, skin lamps.
I think you might like the skin lamps a little too much.
I'm just saying, Christmas is coming.
Okay. I was also fascinated by Ash talking about making masks after therapy sessions. There's anger, fear, and all different kinds of emotions that sometimes need somewhere to go. And for Ash, art has become one of those places.
And we've got plenty more to talk about, so Ash will be back next week for part 2.
We'll get deeper into Dead Puppy Studios and continue a conversation that is funny, weird, occasionally gross, and very much what this show is about.
Horror heals, where the things that scare us can also save us.
We'll see you next week, and Kendall, I'm not getting you a skin lamp for Christmas.
Well, we'll discuss it off mic.
Okay. Well, remember, when somebody asks, is horror good for mental wellness? You tell them, of course it is. The Horror Heals podcast is produced and presented by Mosaic Multimedia, LLC.